you had anything like this in the past here in this area in Starved Rock?
Not for a long, long time in the county.
You think that this person could still be here in this area?
He could possibly be. We're checking out that possibility.
Let me tell you what happened. 3 wealthy women from the Chicago suburbs in March of 1960 went down to Starved Rock State Park to take a hike. Frances Murphy, Mildred Lindquist, and Lillian Oding. They checked into the lodge, they had lunch, and then they were last seen leaving for a hike, never to return. 2 days later, their bodies were found in a shallow cave in the park in St. Louis Canyon. They had been beaten to a bloody pulp. Nobody knew why this would have happened, who would have wanted to kill these ladies. It was the crime of the century. It was a national news story covered in Life magazine. It was a huge deal. My name is Andy Hale. I'm a civil rights attorney based in Chicago. Welcome to my YouTube channel, primarily dealing with the Starved Rock murders. I represent a guy named Chester Weger. Chester got convicted, served over 60 years in prison. He's currently 85 years old. I'm trying to prove his innocence. He had nothing to do with these murders. Everybody who worked at the Starved Rock Lodge at the time took polygraph exams. Chester Weger was a 21-year-old dishwasher at the lodge. He took 6 polygraph exams in the first month and a half, passed all 6. There was hysteria about who could have committed these crimes. Fast forward 8 months later, the law enforcement team zeroes in on Chester Weger for reasons unknown. I think they just wanted to solve the case. They started tailing him 24/7. They took him to Chicago for a 7th polygraph exam, and they claimed he failed, which I believe was false. They threatened him with the electric chair. They threatened to kill him if he didn't confess. He ultimately, in November, winds up giving a confession and then recanted it as soon as he was appointed a public defender. His confession made no sense. It stated basically he was on his work break. He tried to rob the ladies. He thought a camera case was a purse. It wasn't. There's a confrontation. They all agree to go their own way. One of the ladies attacks Chester. He fights back, accidentally kills her. So it's got to kill the other 2, kills all 3, and then takes their bodies somehow up into a cave, one by one, displays the bodies, pulls their clothes down to make it look like a sexual assault, and then goes back to work, and nobody notices anything. And this crime scene was a bloody mess. It was crazy to think that this guy slaughtered 3 women and then went back to his job, and there was no blood on him, nothing out of the ordinary. I got involved in the case 7 years ago. I've been working in the case 7 years. I heard about the case. It reminded me so much of another guy I represented who had been maintaining his innocence for 50 years, Cleve Heidelberg, who I got out of prison after all that time. And we have developed some powerful evidence that Chester Weger did not kill these ladies. Let me tell you one of the first things. A week after the murders, the police get a tip. A telephone operator comes forward and says she overheard 2 men on the phone. They said this. One guy says, "Boy, they sure had a big write-up on the murders in tonight's paper. You know, the kid still has bloody overalls in the trunk of the car. He's not sure what he should do with them." The other guy says, "Well, tell him to burn them." She winds up reporting that to the police. Okay, let's pause there. That means those 2 guys know who did it. There's another guy who's got bloody overalls in the trunk of a car who's involved in the crime. Okay, so they traced the call. The call came from a guy named Glenn Palmatier, who owns a tavern in Aurora, Illinois. The call was traced to his brother, William Palmatier, in Peru, Illinois, which is right outside Starved Rock. These guys wound up giving polygraphs and deny saying these things on the phone. They said, "Oh, we didn't say that," which is just bullshit. They give the telephone operator a polygraph, and guess what? They claim she failed. Oh, this little old telephone operator is lying about that. It was such nonsense. That's the first step. Then I had a guy reach out to me to say he had been friends with a guy named Smokey Rona, who was a local kind of hoodlum in the area, who told him much later in life, before he died, that he knew what happened with the Starved Rock murders because Smokey Rona told him he got hired by the Chicago Mafia to help plan the killing of these 3 women. One of the husbands wanted his wife killed. Smokey Rona, who was a local guy, helped plan the Chicago Mafia, how they were going to kill these three ladies. That was another huge break. Then I had another woman reach out, totally unrelated, and said her grandfather was in the Chicago Mafia and told her, as he was dying of lung cancer before he died, that the guy in prison for the Starved Rock murders was innocent. He had nothing to do with it. He knows that because he organized the guys from the Chicago Mafia that went down there and killed those ladies. Another huge piece of evidence. Let me give you another huge bombshell. There was some hairs found on the finger of one of the victims, Frances Murphy. It also was the finger that had the fingertip cut off post-mortem. Let me say it again. When they found her body, her fingertip was gone, removed, cut off post-mortem. There were hairs on her glove. We took one of those hairs. We first did DNA testing. It came back to a male profile, not Chester Weger. That was a great step. But we didn't know who it was. So I still had the argument from people, all the naysayers, oh, maybe it was law enforcement, maybe somebody who processed the crime scene. Okay. We then submitted that hair, because it had a root on it, okay, to a lab called Otham in Texas. They're cutting-edge genetic genealogists, unbelievable technology. They got a genetic profile. They built out a database, a genetic database. They said that hair came from one of three local brothers whose last name was Bray. These guys would have all been in their 60s. They had nothing at the time. They had nothing to do with Chester Weger. He didn't know these guys. That hair from one of the Bray brothers that was on Frances Murphy, that person was there. That person was at the crime scene. That's how their hair got there, with a root on it. There's no other reasonable explanation. I've got a ton more. It's all on my podcast. You can listen to all the episodes. Those are some of the bigger developments. So we continue to try to prove Chester's innocence. We filed a legal document called a petition for post-conviction relief. The Will County State's Attorney's Office here in Illinois is opposing it. They are fighting me tooth and nail. They claim the confession is legitimate, despite all my evidence showing it's not. It's unbelievable. It's been fully briefed. It's been argued. We've got a ruling date coming up on September 11th, 2024. Fingers crossed. We're hoping the judge allows our case to proceed to the third and final stage, which would be an evidentiary hearing, basically a trial, where we would put on all our evidence. And we've got a ton more. I mean, I've got a pattern and practice of one of the lead detectives being a really rogue, dirty officer. There's an overwhelming amount of things that point to premeditation, multiple people being involved, not this 21-year-old dishwasher who passed 6 polygraph exams and gave this bogus confession because he was coerced and threatened with a death penalty in 1960, by the way, when we didn't really understand the concept of false confessions and why people might give a false confession. And all the factors are there: uneducated, young, threatened with death, trying to save himself. All those factors are present. It is an incredibly outrageous case. It's an incredibly sad case. There is no happy ending, because even if we prove Chester Weger is innocent, which I think we will, I'm going to guarantee it, it's got a sad ending because Chester Weger lost his whole life. He went in at 21, he's 85 today. He lost everything. He had 2 little kids at the time he was arrested. HBO also did a show about it a few years ago called The Murders at Starved Rock. It's a 3-part docuseries. Check it out. None of our evidence that I just talked about is in there because it's stuff we've all learned since that documentary came out. But I'm still investigating, learning new stuff every month. So thank you for coming to this YouTube channel. Check out our videos, check out our podcast. There's going to be a lot more coming down the road. Stay tuned.